Hi, hello. Welcome back to the Dan's BB podcast. My name is Dan, and I'm so glad to have you guys here with me today. So let's get into the episode. So, a little life update. Last week, I was talking to you guys about how it snowed finally, and I was just taking walks, just enjoying it. Literally, this week, overnight, all the snow just melted and it's just foggy outside, which is so weird. But y'all, that global warming is really doing a number, which is crazy. Anywho, this past weekend, I really just had a very chill weekend. I spent a lot of the time with Bizzle, cleaned a bit, getting ready for the new year. And yesterday, I've been really wanting to go to the museum, so I went to the museum, saw some art, put on a cute outfit, and hung out with my sister, which is always good vibes. And I had a blast. I like appreciating art. I'm not going to say I'm an artist, but I love art. It's just a weird thing. And I had such a good time just seeing all of the different artwork and just some artifacts and stuff like that. So it was really fun and just learning the history of it all. And yeah, I had a really good time. And I feel it's such a great way to end the year just very calmly. So for this episode, I actually kind of just wanted to do a recap of 2024. And when I say, I feel there's so many different seasons in 2024, so much has happened. I've changed so much. And I don't know, I just think it's a little crazy. So what I like to do before the year ends is one, make a vision board, right, for 2025, set my goals. And honestly, it's really fun doing that because it's vision board night. It's all cute. You have snacks, watching your favorite show, and creating goals for yourself for the next year. And another major thing that I like to do is I like to read my journals. I went back to my 2024 journal and I just read through it starting from literally January 1st. And I just wanted to just not just highlight the growth and the good parts or the bad parts, but also just helping me see where I am today. And as we know, journaling is super personal, and just hearing or putting myself back in those places, it could be hard. And just really seeing how much I grew. And the way I like to journal is I actually write letters, right? It's not December this and just writing a whole lot of stuff. I like to write letters to myself. So I always start off with Dear Rion, right? And I just put everything on paper. And back in January, it seems such a long time ago, just because my life is just so different as of right now. So back in January 2024, I was really just pushing myself to do as much as possible. I was working as a researcher, right? And I'm not going to say I had bad moments every single day, but I just I really just saw or read about my burnout and how it really affected me. So back in January, I was working as a research assistant, right? And December classes were over, and that's when I finished up my degree. So I was kind of like transitioning, right? So when I graduated, a lot of my mentorship programs ended, but I was still working as a researcher. And I took on studying for my MCAT. So I was like starting to study for that about 5 to 8 hours a day, 6 times a week. It was kind of a crazy schedule. And knowing myself back then, I didn't really like to have a lot of free time because I was like, well, all these other things ended. I need to pick up more things to kind of replace that in order to get to the finish line. So on top of just working as a researcher, picked up more hours. I was studying for my MCAT, and I was also looking for volunteer positions because if you guys know, the life of a pre-med sucks. And it's just like so much requirements, and like you have to meet all these expectations. So I was just like really taking on more and more, even though I knew the outcome that was gonna come at the end. So during like the beginning of 2024, I was adding more and more to my plate. Um, and I feel like I just read about like how the story built up for my burnout to happen. And it was hard because it's like I'm going through kind of a recovery period. At least like since the summer I started going through the recovery period. Um, but I'm not gonna say like I hated my job or whatever, but I felt like every day was kind of the same, and I felt like I didn't have any room for myself. I really did associate that with success, is just taking on so many challenges and just adding as much as I can to my days that would quote unquote make me look more successful. And during that time, I honestly realized how much I was gaslighting myself. Like, I kept on telling myself I was fine. Like, I handled a lot more in the past couple months than I'm doing now. Like, I'm doing a lot less work. Um, and I was like basically just gaslighting myself that I was good. But honestly, now looking back at it, I feel like I really needed it in order to kind of wake up in a way, right? And not put everything or like my whole life into my career or being successful, and just like kind of keeping myself away from that box of my career is who I am. And I feel like for the past couple of years I've worked on trying to figure out who I am, right? Because we all came out of COVID, we all came out of high school, um, kind of lost, I would say. And I was just like figuring out who my authentic self is, right? Like, who am I really? What do I like? What do I not like? Um, and I feel like that was more of like a personal thing that I was dealing with. And the only way that you can really figure out who you are is by blocking out all of that external sound, not taking what people say about you to heart, and to just like take the time with yourself to find yourself, right? Because like a lot of the time we have all these other voices and all these other comments that are like in our space, right? Like we're constantly hearing that, and we won't even have like the time or space to actually hear our own voices. And on top of that, I was also like figuring out what's important to me. Like a lot of the time, I would ask myself whether or not I was happy doing what I was doing. I was asking myself constantly where I see myself. And it's not like where do I see myself career wise, right? Because I was so hyper focused on my career. So I was just like focusing. I was like, what kind of life do I want to live? Like, do I want to have space for travel? Do I want to be able to work from anywhere? Um, do I want to have time and spend time on passion projects or on my passions in comparison to just hyper focusing on my career? And as I probably mentioned in a lot of episodes, after I stopped my volunteer program, after I stopped um, my research position, and I just like paused everything and I stepped back, that's when I really like forced myself to answer all of the hard questions. And as I probably mentioned like a bajillion times, I feel like a lot of this was due to traveling. I feel like whenever I travel, there's a whole new side of me that I learn about, and I just like discover more and more about myself and the world, and I just feel like I become a whole new person after I travel. And it's funny because this was like the first year I traveled in such a long time, like maybe like 3 or 4 years. Um, and that might not even seem like a lot, but there were other like traveling trips that I kind of like passed over in order to focus on school or career or whatever. Um, so it's just like living little. Like I really learned to live rather than just be present, you know what I mean? Rather than just be like, "Hey, I'm here. Like I'm doing XYZ." I'm really focusing on just living life and not being consumed by work and stuff like that. So, yeah, a lot of lessons in 2024. I feel like I learned to put myself out there and not shy away from like meeting new people or anything, because like I've always been such a quiet person. Like I always kept my thoughts to myself. So just like being able to express those freely is such a big like growth for me. And on top of that, like I feel like 2024 was filled with a lot of firsts. I recorded my first podcast episode. I had my first research publication. Um, I had my first like business adventure. I got my first camera, which like kind of pushed me to get into photography and just like find new passions. It was my first year to ever post a TikTok, which is so silly. Um, it was my first time ever going hiking, and it's also my first time being a pet owner. And it's kind of crazy because if you asked me in the beginning of the year, I would tell you that I'm absolutely terrified of any animal, especially cats. Like I was like telling people, I was like, I really hate cats, and now look at me with a freaking kitten. Um, and it's just vibes at this point. And it's just like putting myself out of my comfort zone, because like there's a lot of things that I would not have done if I continued to just like, stay in that comfort zone. Like hiking isn't something my family usually does. And a lot of the times it's like, well, if you go out there, you're going to get murdered. You know what I mean? And it's just like, I wanted to give it a try. You know what I mean? I was like, the world is so big, the world is so beautiful. And I was going through my journey of like reconnecting with nature. So I was like, I want to go hiking. Like, I made up my mind and I literally packed a bag, drove like an hour out to find this beautiful hiking trail. And I just went for it. You know what I mean? And honestly, reconnecting with nature has been like one of the biggest highlights of 2024, mainly because I've always wanted to do it. I was always interested in exploring the world and not only just like hanging out in a city, but just like appreciating the world that God created. You know what I mean? So I was just like really in there, and I feel like it helped me reconnect with nature and spiritually and literally on all levels. Um, and also like this year I've also reconnected with my inner child. Um, like back when I was younger, like maybe like 12 or 13, I decided to give up a lot of my hobbies just to like focus on academics and whatnot, right? And I'm like, well, these hobbies aren't gonna help me succeed or whatever, which like hobbies are for fun, you know what I mean? So I just kind of like went back into a lot of those hobbies. Like I used to love writing, and I'm like doing that with my Medium articles. Um, and I also like really liked photography. Like I really thought that I would be doing photography for a while, and I kind of just, fell out of that. But now I'm like getting back into it, and I'm having such a good time. And as I like kind of reconnect with all these hobbies, I've also been just like taking pictures of such amazing moments with my family and friends and just like adventures that I have. So it's like nice to like be able to look back on that and just see my growth. Like that's also like part of my, I guess, like New Year rituals is to kind of just go through my photos, which honestly shocks me to see how much has happened just in 1 year. So, to finish off this episode, I just wanted to give you guys a list of lessons that I've learned this year. First things first is life doesn't always have to be complicated in order to be successful or feel successful. And I talked about this a lot in my last episode, and how life is just full of decisions, and you can just choose the simpler way to get the same outcome. And to kind of go off of that, life will always pull you in the direction that you're supposed to go in. And just like resisting it doesn't necessarily change the outcome, but it just makes the process a lot more stressful for you. And it will just hurt a lot more if you resist the direction that life is pulling you in. Another huge takeaway from this year is that taking a step back is not quitting. It's just giving yourself space in order to come back stronger. I feel like this was a little bit hard for me to digest just because I don't like to quit on anything. Like, I like to put my all into everything that I do. And I guess it's just hard for me to, take a step back from something that I put so much time and effort in. But I realized this year that taking a step back is always necessary for your growth. You know what I mean? You can't just like work constantly on something um, and put all this energy in that you barely have, because not only are you tired and like running yourself into the ground, you're also gonna end up hating the project or whatever you're doing at the end. Another thing is, your career is not who you are, it's just something that you do. And I feel like this is like something I struggled with, and I know a lot of people struggle with it as well, because it's so easy to put our whole identity in external things, and like something like our career, relationships, whatever. And it's so easy to put all of our self-worth and stuff into that rather than finding it within. Um, it's definitely a hard pill to swallow, but the sooner you do it, the easier it is to figure out who you are and to just live life more as a storybook rather than a checklist, because it's so easy to just be like, this is what I have to do, rather than just like being present for everything that you do. So just live life as a storybook. This year, I also focused on change, being comfortable with it, and being okay with things changing. Because I've always been one to like have things my way or the highway. And I'm like, that's really not how life works. And life will change so frequently. I feel like every day is a whole new like challenge or adventure, or whatever you want to call it. So just like being able to go with the flow, because at the end of the day, I have no control over the outcome. However, I do have control over how I react, and I can embrace the change or I can be upset about it. It's up to me at the end of the day. During this year, I also kind of moved away from this idea of the perfect person. So when I made my vision board back in 2020, like 2023, 2024 for the year, I was hyperfixated on how I can be the perfect researcher, how I can be the perfect pre-med, how I can be just perfect. Do you know what I mean? Like, what do I need to do in order to be perfect? And I feel like as time went on, like holding on to this perfect person honestly had such a negative effect on me. So just like being able to let it go and being cool with the fact that I'm not perfect and nobody's perfect. And I feel like everybody just has their own story and has a story to tell. And I don't need to fit into a certain mold in order to tell my story. And my story is my story. It's good for me. Like, it doesn't have to fit into the perfect narrative. So yeah, 2024 was a very crazy year for me. I feel like there are so many different chapters, so many different lessons that I had to learn, so much change that happened, and it's all for the better. And I feel like I needed all of it, the highs, the lows, everything in between. And I feel like I'm like entering 2025 with such a good attitude. And I'm honestly excited to see what happens in 2025. Like, there's so many goals that I set for myself. There's so many things I want to do in 2025. So seeing how that unfolds and whether or not some things happen or they don't will be very interesting. And honestly, I am so excited to learn as much as I can in this year, and just being open to new things. And as always, before I finish this episode, I want to leave you guys with a quote. The meaning of life is to find your gift. The purpose of life is to give it away. And that was said by Picasso. Anywho, I hope you guys all had such an amazing year, wrapping things up, making your vision boards, setting your goals, and I hope everybody gets exactly what they want in 2025. And if not that, something even better. And just live life. Don't forget to be present in every day and every moment of your life, because tomorrow's not promised. This is like something I remind myself pretty frequently, and I feel like it's the one thing that really just pushes me to be the best version of myself, to do things that I wouldn't necessarily do, because at the end of this, I'm gonna die, so why not just take the chance, do the thing that I've been thinking about doing, taking all the chances in the world, and just go with no regrets. Anywho, I'm gonna end this episode here. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to be here with me today and for being a part of my journey. I truly appreciate it. So, as always, if you like this episode, don't forget to leave a comment or a review, and maybe like even give some suggestions to what you guys want to hear about in 2025. As always, if you like this podcast, share with friends, family, whoever. And if you guys ever want to connect, I am on Instagram at DancePOV. And I will see you guys in the next episode. Bye.